about how to best launch second issues on Kickstarter. We're going to be talking about everything that you're going to want to do and think about, and sort of the opportunities and the challenges that you're going to have with launching a second issue on Kickstarter. But this is a conversation that it's not just going to be me talking to you today. I actually am joined by Joel Rodriguez and Travis Gibb, who are comic book creators that are either soon to be launching a second issue on Kickstarter or have already done a second issue on Kickstarter launch. And so we're going to be jamming on this topic. So if you're new to this channel, if you're new to the station, if you're new to me, I'm Tyler James. I'm the host of Comics Launch, which is a show all about the mindset, strategies, and tactics to bring your projects to life. We focus a lot on the Kickstarter platform, building audiences, and then expanding to channels beyond Kickstarter. And so our show is over at comicslaunch.com. And I'm also the publisher of Comics Tribe. And so I use the Kickstarter platform as a key component in my overall creative publishing business. And so I'd like to turn it over to Joel. And Joel, can you please introduce yourself to the Comics Launch audience?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tyler. As Tyler said, I'm Joel Rodriguez. I am the writer, letterer, and co-creator of the Dusk County Chronicles, which is a horror anthology series. The first issue was funded on Kickstarter in March of 2019. And when he mentioned that one person will be going to Kickstarter soon, that is myself. Issue number 2 for the Dusk County Chronicles launches on September 30th. So it's coming up here.
Awesome. And Travis, you've been on the Comics Launch podcast before, but please introduce yourself again.
Yeah, I was even on the other week and I didn't even know it.
Yeah, you got a surprise spot.
My sound clips are everywhere. Yeah, I am Travis Gibb. I'm creator of Broke Down and 4 Dead Bodies. We successfully launched 2 issues. We got a new one coming out in November. But yeah, I'm here to help and explain, how 2 was way tougher than 1 and easier on some levels.
Awesome. And so this is really our topic for today: how to best launch second issues on Kickstarter. And this is actually a topic that Joel actually had shot me a message on Facebook and said this is something that has been on his mind and has something that he hasn't heard us talk about recently on Comics Launch. And I said, yeah, it's been a while since we addressed this topic. So Joel, can you sort of talk a little bit about why this is something that you wanted to talk about, and sort of some of the things that you're seeing as both potential opportunities and also potential challenges with launching your second issue on Kickstarter?
Yeah, so the reason why this has been on my mind is because for the past few months, I've been prepping and doing all the pre-game work for the second issue of the Dusk County Chronicles. And while coming across building the page, getting all the marketing together, I started noticing a bunch of things that I hadn't originally considered when launching the first issue. And of course, when you launch your first issue, it's the stress of, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never gone on Kickstarter before. I was lucky enough to find Comics Launch when I did, so I was a lot more prepared than I could have been. But when it came to issue 2, I had all of that knowledge from the first one, but it didn't answer all of the questions launching the first campaign, I mean. And a couple of things that I started finding myself wondering was, okay, I have 2 issues now. If I try and work everything in from those 2 issues, it's very easy for your pledge levels to just go completely bonkers and you end up with 30-something pledge levels, because one of the challenges with your second issue is trying to capture all of your pre-existing backers, everyone from your first issue, while not alienating anyone that hasn't heard of you before. There's a common misconception on Kickstarter that when you launch a second issue, it's just for that second issue to get the second issue funded. However, it's more so trying to capitalize on the audience that you already have while adding another jumping on point for the new people. So it's trying to figure out the best way to market to all of those.
Yeah. And so this is, I think you're already bringing up some good points and some good challenges, especially things like the spiraling of, that first Kickstarter campaign you launch. There's only so many products you're making and so many combinations thereof. But every additional product that you add to your stable could potentially exponentially expand the number of pledge levels you have if you let it spiral like that. And that isn't something that we recommend. I'm curious, Travis, did some of these similar things come up for you as you approached your second issue Kickstarter, or were there even other things that you were looking at?
Yeah, especially when you go after the collector's market in your first one, right? So I had 4 variant covers plus a new artist, and so I had 5 covers total. How do I allow someone to get some of those issue 1 covers, as well as the smorgasbord of 3 new covers for issue 2, and try to figure out a way to do that, keeping the prices low, trying to get the right collector in on that. So that was a big struggle for me. The other thing was, making sure that I had the right turnover. One of the things that we didn't talk about, or maybe it's coming up, is, that first Kickstarter is a lot of your friends and family back you. They don't really come back for the second one. How do you build that momentum? Because those are your big backers on issue 1. And you kind of got to earn them for issue 2.
Yeah. And this is one of those things that I know a lot of creators tell me, and they say, like, well, like if they're launching the first, but then they're already thinking about the second, or they've launched the first and it was successful, but they make the assumption that all of their friends and family will not come back for this one. And in some cases that may bear out. In other cases, that may be a function of us not making a strong case to our friends and family, or the same strong case to our friends and family the first time as we did the second time. So usually, how it worked for me when I launched my very first Kickstarter, I had no problem at all, basically literally letting everyone in my world, we're talking ex-girlfriends, we're talking ex-roommates, we're talking ex-coworkers, friends from college, friends from high school, literally everyone that I was connected to know about that, because that first launch was so important to me. Yeah. Now, my second launch didn't do any of that. And I think you're right, Travis. Most of those people that I didn't make an explicit outreach to in my friends and family network, but not necessarily my comic connection, they did not come out. But I don't think it was because they didn't want to support me. I think it's more likely that it's because I didn't make that same effort. Now, the good news is that the success of the first launch helped me find enough true fans and backers that I didn't need that to happen to get funded. But so I want to caution people to think, like, if you bring the same level of energy to that second issue to your friends and family things, like, I actually don't think it's necessarily a wrong way to think that you won't get that same support. I just think most creators don't actually bring that same energy to their second launch for friends and family. And that's the reason, not that, oh, they don't want issue number 2, or they don't want to support me again. Thoughts?
Yeah, I could agree with that. I mean, I was looking at my numbers before we started. So I had about 32 backers on the first 2 days with $1,000 on day 1 from my first campaign. The second, I had 1,500 out the door with 53 backers. So it shows that I had a huge initiative and huge people. And a lot of those weren't my friends and family, obviously, because the number was slightly higher and more backers. So that means more people came to it and really got that drive. But for me, as you both know, during my campaign, I had my dad die, and I had my dad died right before, and I had my son born during my campaign. Yeah. So it's interesting, how these things affect what's going on. And because I built such a strong campaign in the first one for Phil, did my stuff, that I got really carried towards the end of the campaign, because I started out really strong, and then I slowly got it. I funded in the first week, and then I slowly grew from there. I didn't get a larger number money-wise than the first campaign, but I did have more backers. I got 6 more backers in the first one. But that's really due to my involvement in the community, and my fulfillment is what I believe in. That is those two work hand in hand. The community kept pushing me out there, kept making sure that I was there when I couldn't. And the other thing is me doing what I was supposed to do, fulfilling, communicating, making sure that I built that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, life doesn't stop coming at us right. Just because we happen to launch on Kickstarter. And I know Joel has some work things that are going to happen next month that will make his Kickstarter particularly interesting. The good
Oh,
news
yeah.
for Joel is Joel's been through the ringer once before. He knows what's entailed and knows what it takes to get a project funded. And so he's putting a lot of pieces in place ahead of time, knowing next month is going to be crazy time in another part of his life. So like, I'm curious, Joel, like, so this is kind of a fun thing that I have a theory about this, but like, when you think back to that first Kickstarter campaign, what are, what feelings do you have about it? Like what are some of the most salient memories of that first campaign that you hope to recreate in the second one?
Well, naturally, one that I would love to recreate would be the fact that my first campaign hit the funding goal within 10 hours. So a lot of that I can attribute back to, like Travis said, friends and family, because I hit the pavement running. I was telling everyone, okay, it's launching in 30 minutes. Here we go. And a lot of people showed up in ways that I honestly wasn't expecting. So the first bit of support of getting all of those people supporting in ways that I wasn't expecting, it was really refreshing, especially with it being a first campaign. You could run into imposter syndrome and all of those things that as creators we're all familiar with. Yeah. So that that support was extremely welcome. I'm hoping to get that same or at least something similar in that regard. But I think one thing that I loved that I did on my part was the fulfillment. We fulfilled the first Kickstarter extremely fast. We went through Rich over at Comic Impressions, and everything went smooth as could possibly be. So we extremely over delivered when it came to our fulfillment. So I'm hoping that that will come back and bring more people back for the returning backers.
Great. And, you know, I didn't coach Joel to say this, but what's funny is you actually, the point or the theory that I was going to bring up is something that you just illustrated just perfectly. It's almost like I told you what to say, but I didn't. That's right, I didn't. And I asked you what was most, like, your most compelling and most, you know, salient memories from your first campaign. And you know what you mentioned? You mentioned the very beginning, and you mentioned the very end. You mentioned that first launch day and that rush of being surprised and elated that that people came out and you weren't sure what was going to happen because it was your first launch. And then you mentioned like your satisfaction with actually delivering it. And that's actually how most people, even myself that's done this again 18 times, that's kind of how we look at our Kickstarters. We tend, and it's how we look at most stuff. We tend to remember the beginnings and we kind of tend to remember the ends. And a lot of times we kind of forget about the tough middle road. And when we launch our second Kickstarter campaigns, a lot of creators I've found have sort of reported that like the second Kickstarter was harder than the first, not because they did worse or did like significantly worse, just because it felt like heavier. Because a lot of times, because they forgot what it was like in that middle stretch of the dead zone or the tough time. Like they just of their last campaign, they remember the good stuff and they kind of forget the tough stuff. And so so that's one thing that I'm just you know, I want to prepare you for. And it sounds like, I mean, in addition to, you know, other serious family stuff that Travis was going through, that's another thing that just is a reality of second issue campaigns that people should keep an eye out on. So I want to talk a little bit about that easy jumping on point, because this is something that I think is actually absolutely imperative to Kickstarter success, is that every campaign that you launch on Kickstarter should make it clear that this is an easy entry point for any new reader, for anyone just discovering it, as well as making it something that people that are going to launch or are going to, you know, have supported you on the first one are going to come in and you know, pick up where they left off. So what are some ways, Travis, that you made it clear that your second issue was a clear jumping on point And then we'll see if Joel's doing anything or planning to do anything that for his.
Yeah, I mean, the first was make it a 1 and 2 campaign. It's for issue 1 and 2, because just like a con, most people just buy issue 1, and I noticed the trend that the people who were just pushing issue 2 had a lower success rate. Even today, I was actually talking to someone prior to this. He has a small book called Tilt, and he's struggling to fund, and he asked for advice, and I was like, first thing, it's all about issue 2. We need to make it about issue 1. He went and fixed that and got 3 backers today, because it's such a big deal to show that issue 1 is part of your campaign, and using it to build the momentum of, hey, we not only have we done this once, we can be trusted. The other thing is showing that we want you part of this. Get on now. It's growing. It's being part of it. And I did a small in between mine. I actually did a small like Indiegogo, and what that did is that actually even helped even further. A lot of people jumped on over there for the 1 because I get it in far enough gap. Sorry, my baby's crying back there. Jumped in on the gap, came back in for issue 2. So I had a 1 and 2. So I built that to 1 and 2. All my pledge levels gave issue 1 on some level. So whether it be on at least a digital level, so anybody could get on and really building my campaign around this franchise, not just an issue 2.
Yeah. And so that's really the pro tip that for those of you that are working on your project. I know the default is that a lot of people will try to list their book as if it's as if it's the title of the book, like they would list it on Comixology or through Diamond. They'd say, well, I'm trying to fund issue number 2, so my project title will be my Sugar Man number 2, right? But when you're creating project titles on Kickstarter, they're not book titles, they're project titles. And so your project wants to be written in such a way that it signals to the world what this project is about, who it's for, and that also makes it clear that it's a clear jumping on point. So the pro tip is that instead of saying this is Broke Down and 4 Dead Bodies number 2, say it's for project is for numbers 1 and 2. Instead of Dusk County Chronicles number 2, say it's for numbers 1-2, which makes it clear that you can get the first issue in addition to the other one. And I actually have the second volume of the Red 10 coming up, but I will title it, the Red 10 volume 1 and 2 complete superhero murder mystery or something to that effect, so that it's clear that, hey, you can get it all here, and you don't have to know anything to jump on board. Anything else, Joel, that you're doing in order to make this a clear jumping on point, or to get people up to speed who might not have gotten the first issue?
I think that's a good one. I'm definitely doing that. The project title for the Dusk County Chronicles is actually Dusk County Chronicles 1 and 2 Twisted Tales of Terror. So already have that in full effect. Another thing that I'm doing is offering issue number 1 as an add-on. So I have it baked into a few of the pledge levels, but if there's a particular pledge level that someone wants that has collector stuff, because like Travis, I have variant covers for the collectors and different combinations thereof. But say someone wants this particular issue number 2 variant cover, like I have one from Walter Osley. Say they want the Walter Osley cover, but they also want issue number 1, they can get it as an add-on. So even if it doesn't fit into the particular pledge that they want, there's still an option for them to grab on and hop on and get it.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to go about it. You don't want to do every possible permutation, because that's just going to be a super busy Kickstarter page. And so when I'm strategizing for my bundles, I'm trying to strategize and pick the bundles for different tiers or different sort of types of backers. Like, this is the backer that just wants the new stuff. You have something for him. This is the backer that wants to get caught up on literally everything. Have a bundle for him. This is the backer that wants everything and needs some original art or some high tier things. But then further down on your page, you can put together an add-on menu for some of the most desirable items, and have backers add to that. And then if you do use a pledge manager, something like BackerKit or CrowdOx, after the fact, it makes it really easy to manage those add-ons, and even get people who didn't add on Kickstarter to go ahead and to while they're at checkout, throw in another candy bar, throw in another copy of your book. So I think that those are good. That's a good strategy to handle that one combination issue.
Well, one of the things I did too, because I just looked at the campaign while you were talking, is I made sure that all my sweet spots, so like the collector's kit, had a collector's kit with catching up. So it was a collector's kit, and then I had one that was with catching up. So it had all those sweet, really good, really great ideas. I don't want you missing out. And I don't want them on the add-on because I would rather get them right there when I had it. For me, people do add-ons, but I really want to get them right there. So I created, catch up on this tier. So get the collector's kit. If you want the collector's kit with catch up, and if you want the mega collector's kit from 1 and 2, here it is all combined, crazy high price, and people bought them. I didn't have a single tier that people didn't purchase last time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So one thing that we're kind of talking about issue 2s, but the launching issue 2s on Kickstarter, but there's sort of an assumption in terms of both ours that you've already launched an issue 1 on Kickstarter. But actually, I want to bring this up because I've had a number of coaching calls with creators over the past 2 weeks, and you wouldn't believe how many people are looking to make their first Kickstarter a launch for like an issue 2 or an issue 5 or an issue 7, but they've never launched anything on Kickstarter before. And so my advice to all of them is that you want to treat Kickstarter like a new channel that you're setting up shop on. And so even if your issue 1 is already done, even if you've already sold it, even if you've been selling it for years, if you're trying to get into the Kickstarter platform, I would still build a launch around a relaunch or maybe a new cover, a Kickstarter exclusive cover, or the same cover but with some additional add-ons, and launch with a number 1 on the Kickstarter platform before you do the subsequent issues. And the reason for that is like it will set a tone and get you and make it clear that like, hey, you're coming into this channel, this new channel, and getting in front of new potential backers, as opposed to just starting to start with like a random issue in your series. Even if it makes sense, even if it seems to make sense to you, it doesn't really make sense for people like checking out your history on Kickstarter. And so I recommend most creators, like if you're instead of launching mid-series, launch with a new number 1 or some sort of version of number 1, or a number 1 that combines number 1 plus what the new thing is. Joe D. McPhee said that he made a mistake like that. He didn't start with an issue 1. He actually started with issue 6 on Kickstarter. And so even though he had catch-up tiers, it's a little harder to get the positioning and the messaging right. If you're trying to, sell in a new channel that's never seen your stuff before. Good thing for Joe is he's still got funded. So good on you, Joe. But we're hoping for his next series, he makes it clear that, hey, this is a clear jumping on point. So I just want to clarify that. So what else?
Well, I've talked to people too. As you know, I talked to a lot of people. The disheartening thing, I'm sure you had the same problem, is they want so desperately to get that next issue out. They're so worried about that next issue. They can't even see back the value of how important that was because they're ready to get that next thing out. And sometimes you got to take a step back to take a step forward because they'll be like, well, our lettering's better, our art's better, we've got a different colors, we've got all these things. They're so hyped up about that new thing that they want to create that they forget that they forget about the fans, really. They forget they're thinking about what they want versus what's best for the fans.
Yeah.
If you always with fans, you're gonna be fine.
Yeah, they're thinking about what they personally want as opposed to what's best for the fans and what's best for the business.
Right.
Because
going off of the perspective that it can give the fans is, okay, say this is the 4th issue in. Why all of a sudden after 4 issues are you looking for crowdfunding? Is something not working? It can send a mixed message that may not be intentional. It could just be, like you said, Tyler, I'm looking to get into a new revenue stream. I'm looking to get into a new market. But it all depends on how it is perceived by the fans.
Yeah. And I've also had a lot of conversations with creators that are very like literal, like, oh, well, but I don't need the money for issue. I don't need funding for issue 1. I need funding for issue 7.
Right.
So therefore I have to handcuff myself to launch a Kickstarter for just issue 7. Otherwise I'm being disingenuous. Like, no, Like what, like think about what makes the most sense from a business standpoint and from a marketing standpoint, because it's like at the end of the day, the audience really doesn't care what you need the funding specifically for, whether it's to pay your colorist or your artist or your letter or anything. Like, as long as you deliver on the promises that you make in your campaign, they're not going to audit you, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think that gets people in a little bit of trouble, because they get in their heads that they've got to be super literal about where they are with things, when in fact, I think it's very smart to treat Kickstarter like a channel that you can launch, your properties in, and you want to do that in just a way that makes sense. Like, you wouldn't go to a new convention, which is another kind of channel, and you wouldn't go to a new convention and try to pitch everybody the 4th issue of your book and not have anything else on the table, right? Because it probably wouldn't go too well. So let's talk a little bit about, Joel, you brought up a question about, or you sort of brought up in the sort of our pre-conversation about, the challenge of dealing with your ego and your pride when it doesn't go the way you thought. Talk a little bit about that and why that was something that was on your mind.
Well, the biggest thing that I had to come up with was, with the first campaign, like I said, it funded within the first 10 hours, but a lot of that was super backers. A lot of that was things that aren't necessarily going to repeat with this one. So it's being able to mentally go back to square one, kind of say, okay, I know how the first one did, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the second one is going to be as great right out of the gate. And if it isn't, that may not necessarily be my fault. It could just be the excitement from the first one. And it's essentially making sure that we put the work in for the second issue instead of banking on the success of the first one.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, I go into every launch assuming it will do as good or better than the last one. I operate from that place because honestly, it doesn't hurt. Like it doesn't hurt at all to do that. But I also do the work such that result is the thing that makes the most sense,
Yeah.
And I'm doing the work in advance. So it's like, well, my inputs are, all my inputs are big, are more. I'm better at this than I was the last time. I've got a bigger audience than I did the last time. I've added more value to the world than I did the last time. So it should make sense that happens. Now, if it doesn't happen, or if something goes wrong or something doesn't, well, I also try to, keep my superpower is I'm just pretty even keel. Like I don't get too hot. I don't get too cold, which is also probably one of my weaknesses, but yeah, so that's something to do about it. But I think it is important to recognize that, past results are not a guarantee of future results. Yeah.
But at the same time, we need to be able to, going back to ego, we need to be able to admit what didn't work for the first one. If there was something that we really liked about the first one, but it didn't end up working out the way we were expecting, we have to be able to let that go for the second one to make the second campaign even better.
Yeah. Now, do you have an example of something that didn't work in the first one that you can call out that you're going to make a pivot on, or?
Let's see.
Putting you on the spot here. Aaron Dowan says, this is all great stuff. Y'all are hitting me right in the soul.
Yeah.
Hey, we got you, Aaron.
Let's see. I think one thing that I struggled with in the beginning was my my marketing throughout the campaign, because I came onto one of the group chats for the Comics Launch Pro, and after my first big day, I was really stressed about the campaign going forward because of a couple of different things that I was looking at. So particularly the metrics behind the scenes that I was looking at added stress to the campaign when they're stressful enough as it is. So
isn't it funny that how, like, you can launch have an unbelievable day one, like more than you thought would be happen. And then by day two, you found new things to be stressed out about, right?
Yeah, no matter how good it is, you will be
Yeah.
stressed about something.
Yeah. I mean, humans are incredibly adaptable, and we normalize success like this. And we look for problems because our lizard brains are triggered to not let wherever we are be enough. And so it does, like the same thing will happen for people doing $10,000 a day ones, $20,000 a day ones, $100,000 a day ones. It's the way it goes. So it's important to recognize that. Travis?
You remember me, Tyler. I was losing my mind because I funded with less money than the last one. Like, I was losing my mind. And I didn't care about my dad's dying and I can't do podcasts because I could be sad, or that I have a new baby. I didn't care about any of that. I was just like trying to get it, instead of looking at, all right, my backers are increasing. I'm building new client. People I'm getting more backers every day. I'm getting a lot of people to come in on Wish You Won. Instead of looking at those things, we don't. We look at what we need. Because that number mattered, because we have two numbers. We have a number that we need to fund, and then a number we really need. So I was under by like $500. So I had to come up with $500 between now and issue 3 to figure that out. It's not a huge deal. It is what it is, but we build ourselves up. Instead of looking at what works and what didn't work and what we could do to increase it, we focus on one thing that's not working instead of what is working, what did kill it.
Right. Right. And so when you look back, Joel, on what did work, what's one or two things that worked then and you're going to do again and hopefully do a little bit better for your second launch?
I think it was my bundling, because with the first one, I had a variety of variant covers, which I'm doing again for issue 2. And it's figuring out the best way to make it to provide value at a cost that at an amount makes sense to the customer, as well as with the bundle. And one of my most popular pledge levels for the first campaign was actually my variant bundle that had everything. So now it's duplicating that while also incorporating the first variant bundles in issue 2 for the new people coming on board.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely something that you're going to want to do. And I think a lot of things, sometimes we can get worried about that second issue launch. But the other thing that I've found, especially when you have fund your first Kickstarter and do a larger print run, and so you still have stock for number ones, is that the second issue profitability can potentially be higher than your first issue launch, because especially if you can move a lot of those first issues in your bundles. So is that something you're going to be able to do this time?
I hope so. We've got through the conventions and all of the pre-marketing I've been doing, my fan base on my email list is about twice as big as it was for the first one. Mm-hmm. And I've been working on growing the awareness for the series all throughout this time. So I'm hoping that if they don't already have issue number 1, that they'll pick it up, or maybe pick up a variant cover that they didn't have before and move product that way.
Right. Great. Anything, Travis, that like in looking back, were there some things that you did on issue 1 that you didn't do on issue 2 that now looking back, you're like, that probably made an impact?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my key points is getting someone to a $50 point to a $35 is very, very different. And I did really well at the $35 point, but I didn't convert as much because I thought I could go up a little bit to a $50 mark with the variant covers and all that. It didn't translate as much. So I wish I would have done a tier that was $35, because that kept me at the $20, $25 per backer level. It gets crazy towards the end when a couple people do the big ones, but I was averaging like 25 to 27 on the first campaign, and then on the second one it was lower to 19 to 21. So I really want to get that backer, because that helps me convert. So yeah, I want to build a pledge level. So when I do issue 3, they will be a $35 pledge level, because it seems to be a good sweet spot where they're not quite spending $50, but they're willing to spend a little bit more than an average.
Yeah. and getting those pricings right, that can make the difference between like getting a $35 instead of 27, or
Right.
49 instead of 40 or whatever, times a lot of backers quickly adds up. And so pricing it's both an art and a science, and something that it takes doing this again and again and again to get it right, and to get really good at it. But the challenge with Kickstarter is you can never repeat the same exact campaign at the same time with the same combinations in front of the same people and get the same results. So much of what we see for our own stuff is anecdotal. Now, if you actually look at the Kickstarter data across the comics category as a whole, and creators that launch as a whole, you do see that, in general, success rate and funding amount and backer counts for creators, all things considered, like, tend to go up the more campaigns that you do. So that's something that's we can play to our advantages, and I encourage you, like, don't immediately go to, well, here's all the reasons why my second campaign is not going to work, even though my first one did. Like, time spent there is time wasted, and usually worrying about things that aren't going to come to pass. But what you do want to remember is, like, to make sure that you're doing all of the things that really did help that first campaign get successful. I'm
doing a third right now with Advocator, and I'm seeing that. So I went back to some of my pricing models from the first one, and we're seeing the results of that.
Yeah.
We had a $20 for variant covers, and we switched it back down to the 15, like in the first one, and we're seeing them skyrocketing. So it's just a price point and figuring that out.
Nice. And so, do you want to give a quick pitch to that while you're here on with us?
I can, sure.
Because I think
here,
the Advocator is something we talked about a little bit on this show before, and we have a lot of indie creators that may actually want to connect with you at some point and be featured in there. So go ahead.
Yeah, we're finishing up the 2019 run of the Advocator. It's 6 creators, all different franchises that have been funded. This is the first time that we actually have a brand new comic series called Dead Kingdom from a guy out in Canada. I cannot say his name, so I'm not going to try. But this is the first time we're trying something new. We're actually going to launch somebody in this book. This is their first appearance of that book. But we have people you've heard on the show. If you listen, Chimp in the Brown Hat, he was on here. He won a contest to be on it. You have me. I'm doing my new series that comes after Broke Down, which is called Reaper. We got Manny Wolf, which is Rob Anderson stuff. You ever heard from Rob Anderson? What else? We got Bal, who funded earlier this year from Chuck Pino. So there's all sorts of people. Oh, is there one more? I think there's one more. I think we're good. That's 6. Yes. So yeah. Oh, no. That's the last one. Down for Worlds of Oz. That's Eric Hawkins, also funded on Kickstarter later this year. So basically, if you have a book and you want to be featured in a future issue of Advocator, you can create a 4-page story. You can add it to the franchise. We are theming them now to try to put it together. So this one's Halloween themed, so it's all monsters. But yeah, we can get you in an issue, and we can help you gain a new fan base, because what you get out of being part of this is you get copies of the book, because nobody gets any money from it. It's just copies of the book. The other thing that you get is part of the email list. So you get the email list from that, which will help build you for your next campaign, because everybody's kind of sharing and doing that. That's a quick pitch. Advocator is online on Kickstarter.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll make sure we link it up to it, and you can jump on this post afterwards and send a link to the Kickstarter and how people can find out about that. So cool. So anything we missed so far talking about second issues, and or other things that we want to just make sure that creators are aware of as they go into their second issue launches?
I'm looking at our notes from earlier, so that's why I'm quiet. The only thing that I would want to make sure is added is just really work on, instead of rushing that out, is quality. Because I've noticed a couple creators, and I'm going to mention, I asked them before I came on the show to ask if I could talk about them. Myself, I love issue 2. I think issue 2 is good, but I don't think it's as strong as issue 1. It's not because I rush it. It's because I wanted it out at a certain time. And people do that. A friend of mine, Rumble King, he funded his issue. He funded for less. He paid for the artist, and then the artist didn't work out. So now he has to find a whole new artist to get issue 2 done, even though it's already funded. I think what a lot of creators do is we forget, like when we first fund, I know that the people who are successful tend to have a lot of it done. And then we think that we can kind of make up for it in the second issue. And I really don't think that that's the way to go, because you sacrifice a lot to do that. So I really want to say that. And even though my issue was mostly done, I only had to color some of it before it. But you can even tell in the script, that it's a setup issue. And if I would have gave it another pass or two, it could have been a better issue. It's not that it's bad; it's that it could have been better.
Right.
And I see a lot of creators make that mistake where issue 2 is taking longer for them to get out because they're rushing it and they're not fulfilling this time, and now they're putting themselves in a bad situation and losing all the goodwill from the first one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point, and just something that, especially in this indie space, a lot of us that are launching our first couple of books or first books, guess what? The book that you launch this year is going to be nothing. The first book that you launch this year is going to be something that you're going to look back 5 years from now and be like, huh, that was cute. Wow. But like next year, you're going to look back at it, hopefully, and you'll be like, that was trash. And I'm so much better right now. And then 5 years from now, you look back and like, oh, that's cute. Good for me for putting that out into the world, even though I didn't know what I was doing. Now, occasionally there's a rare gem of creators that come out of nowhere and are just like fully formed mythical beasts of amazing talent. But most of us that put our pants on one leg at a time here, most of us are works in progress. But with the point and the focus on progress. So yeah, you should make it a goal to get better with each book that you put out and take it more seriously and invest a little bit more into it. And so like, I love seeing creators that, all right, second, third issue. Well, I'm going to invest and go get a variant cover from like one of my favorite artists who also does commissions, or I'm going to, really, it's time to stop doing my own lettering that I'm not great at. And and actually pay somebody that is a pro letterer and up the caliber of it. Like, I love seeing that because I like actually looking back at old creators. I like looking back at Brian Bendis's first works, and, he came a long way from Torso and from other things that he did, even though they were acclaimed things at the time. Like, the quality definitely is leveled up, and I want to see that from indie creators as well. So it's a great.
Those are fighting words. Jinx and Goldfist are his best work. So,
so
that's a whole nother podcast, and we're going to have to talk about that.
Go look at it, knowing what you know about comic book lettering and art and balloon placement and I enjoyed the books. I'm not gonna say that, but those wouldn't be published at Image today.
Right.
And maybe that's fighting words, but I'm just saying. Joel, any final thoughts?
I think we pretty much covered everything that we talked about leading up to the show. I really appreciate you having me on, because there were a lot of things that I wanted to get out. And when I originally brought the idea up to Travis to see if he was interested in coming on, it was more so a learning experience for myself, as well as trying to capture these ideas now that both of us have been in the heat of the moment, because I know that there's a lot of stress going into the first issue, but after the first one, you don't really think about the second one until you're there. So now, while we have all these ideas going on, I thought it would be a good time, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And we'll make sure that this is going to air on the podcast when your campaign is live. So we'll hopefully send some Comics Launch listeners over to check out the next batch of Dusk County Chronicles. Hey, thanks everybody who tuned into the stream. Thanks, Courtney. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Joe. Aaron, there's some comments and some questions that we didn't answer in the chat, but hopefully you guys will take a minute, jump on there and answer any questions that they have for you guys as well. And I will try to get those answered as well at a later date. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in and watching. Thank Travis and Joel for sharing their expertise and insights. And I can't wait to see what everybody launches next. Take care.